So, what if I told you that one of the biggest ideas we have about success is just, well, wrong? That this constant push for early specialization might actually be the very thing holding you, and a lot of us, back. That's the huge provocative argument at the center of David Epstein's incredible book, Range. And man, it challenges everything we hear about needing to specialize and needing to start like yesterday.
To really get this, we need to look at two absolute legends of sports who took completely different roads to the top. On one side, you've got Tiger Woods. He's the ultimate specialist. And on the other, Roger Federer, the classic generalist. I mean, their stories couldn't be more different.
Okay, first, let's talk about the Tiger path. This is a kid who was practically born with a golf club in his hands. His destiny was meticulously mapped out by his father. And we're not just talking about practice. This was what experts call deliberate practice. Super intense, super focused. From the second he could stand, he had a putter at 7 months old, and he was on national TV at 2. His path was just a straight, unwavering line to greatness.
And then you have Roger. His path was way more winding. As a kid, he was into everything. Skiing, wrestling, soccer, basketball, you name it, he probably tried it. His parents were what Epstein calls pulley, not pushy. See, they just wanted him to explore and have fun, which is a huge contrast to that intense focus of the Tiger path. He didn't even specialize in tennis until way after his peers did.
You know, the Tiger story is the one we're always sold. It's the whole foundation of that 10,000-hour rule, right? The idea that a massive head start in focused practice is the only way to get ahead. But here's the question Epstein makes us ask, and it's a big one. Is the Tiger path really the right one for you?
And it turns out, the answer to that question really depends on the world you're playing in. This is where Epstein makes this brilliant distinction between two types of environments, what he calls kind and wicked.
The Tiger path works perfectly in these kind learning environments. Think about games like chess or sports like golf. The rules are totally fixed, patterns repeat over and over, and your feedback is immediate and crystal clear. You hit the ball, you see where it goes. In these worlds, specialization is king, because that feedback loop is perfect. You do something, you see the result, you adjust. It's a very clear path to getting better.
But here's the thing. Most of the modern world, it's wicked. In a wicked world, the rules are fuzzy, or worse, they change on you without notice. Your feedback is slow and often misleading. Think about being an entrepreneur or a doctor or trying to navigate a complex career. You might not know if you made the right call for months or even years. One psychologist called it playing Martian tennis. You don't know the rules, and they might change mid-point.
And this, right here, is the central dilemma. For every single one of us trying to figure out our careers, we have to ask ourselves, are the problems I'm solving more like perfecting a golf swing, where everything is clear? Or are they more like Martian tennis, just full of ambiguity and constant change?
So, if most of us are living and working in a wicked world, what does the evidence actually say about the best way to succeed? Well, this is where the Roger path, that winding, exploratory journey, really starts to shine.
Research actually shows that most top athletes follow the Federer model. They have what's called a sampling period. This is where generalists build their range. And they're not just messing around for fun. They're developing this broad toolbox of skills that they can transfer from one thing to another. And maybe most importantly, they're learning about themselves.
And this is wild. This advantage goes way beyond sports. Check this out. One study found that Nobel Prize-winning scientists are 22 times more likely to have an artistic hobby, like acting, dancing, or even magic, than other scientists. 22 times. So why? Well, their range isn't a distraction. It's actually the source of their creativity. It gives them different ways of thinking, so they can see problems from angles their super specialized peers just completely miss.
And that whole myth of the 20-something tech genius who drops out of college, yeah, it's mostly just that, a myth. So much for that, right? Research from MIT and Northwestern found that the average age of a founder of a really fast-growing startup is 45. They succeed not in spite of their winding career paths, but because of them.
See, that sampling period helps you find what economists call high match quality. And you can think of it like dating, right? You wouldn't just marry the first person you ever went out with. You sample, you date around, you learn what you like, what you don't like, and you find a much better fit. It's the exact same thing with your career. That early exploration helps you find the work that truly fits who you are. Okay, so the evidence is pretty compelling. But how do we actually do this? How do you embrace range when the world is screaming at you to specialize? It really means we have to shift how we think about our careers, and even about who we are.
Professor Herminia Ibarra puts it perfectly. She says we learn who we are only by living and not before.
This just flips the usual career advice on its head. It's not about sitting in a room and finding your passion. It's about discovering it by doing things. Her advice? First act and then think.
Part of the problem is this funny little cognitive bias called the end of history illusion. It's this idea that we can all look back 10 years and see how much we've changed, but we tend to believe we'll change very little in the next 10 years. And that little illusion makes us create these rigid, long-term plans for a future self we haven't even met yet.
So, instead of a rigid 5-year plan, think like a scientist of yourself. You ask smaller questions and you run short-term, low-stakes tests. Like maybe you're curious about coding. Instead of signing up for a year-long boot camp, what if you just tried a free online course for a weekend? That's a super low-stakes experiment that gives you really valuable data about your own interests and skills.
Y Combinator co-founder Paul Graham has the perfect way to think about this. Don't work backward from some big, distant goal. Instead, work forward from where you are right now. In other words, just focus on taking the next step that opens up the most interesting new doors, instead of trying to follow some rigid map to a destination that you'll probably outgrow anyway.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that you should compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to somebody else on a totally different path. It's about choosing short-term exploration over some rigid long-term plan. Which brings us to the final question, a great one for your book club or your next team meeting. Forget the 5-year plan for a second. What's your next 2-month experiment?